My name is Steve Gilman, and for decades I've been helping brands engage with their audiences. On this podcast, we'll connect the dots in the fast-paced world of branding by talking with entrepreneurs, leaders, and marketers on the front lines of telling brand stories. Today I'm talking with Ken Marcus, senior writer at the Martin Agency, about trusting your team, what makes a great ad, and how to be single-minded in your messaging. So welcome to the Brand Story podcast. My guest today is Ken Marcus, and Ken is the senior writer for the Martin Agency and has been with Martin for about 14 years, working with clients like Walmart, Pizza Hut, Nespresso, Sling, CarMax, GEICO, probably too numerous to mention. He's also faculty at the VCU Brand Center, where he teaches brand integration. And welcome to the podcast, Ken. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Flattered to be asked. No one usually asks my opinions. It's always flattering to be asked to talk about advertising.
Yeah. What's interesting is our whole idea with the podcast is, I'm sure you see a marketing podcast, there's a whole ton of them out there. And they're almost always the CMO or the senior leader. And one of the things we decided to do is we're trying to get a really wide swath of people who tell brand stories. And, from my experience of doing this 25 some odd years is, the input and the great ideas come from all sorts of different directions. It's on the client side, it's the people on the front lines, it's the social people, so we're really combining really different points of view, which is really unusual, I think, for a podcast. So far it's been going really well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So a little perspective for people who don't know where Ken works. The Martin Agency is, I think, one of the agencies we all sort of look up to. You all are one of the best in the business. I've followed the Martin Agency forever. And you all won 2020 Ad Week Agency of the Year this year, which I think is amazing for the year we all just had. And, working with clients like UPS and GEICO and CarMax, and it's just really impressive growth in this last year and the way you all help your clients. And I think your leadership is really pretty amazing. And I think your CEO is also a JMU grad like you and I.
Yep. Kristen's a JMU grad. Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Yep. As am I. I'm JMU 93.
That's pretty great. Yeah, a lot of great people came out of JMU and still do.
Yeah.
And it's really unusual. I see a lot of people in our business out of JMU.
Yeah, definitely. They have at the time, they didn't really have a big ad program. When I was there, I was just like a marketing and English double major. But now they have a very good advertising, both on their SMAD program, media arts program, and then more developed advertising marketing degree.
Yeah, it's really grown. When I went to JMU, I studied marketing probably just like you did, but I also had a theater directing degree.
Oh, cool.
So the two things I combined was, directing plays, because when I went, you could get a space at the experimental theater and put up anything you wanted. Yep. So there was some really great experimenting back then. And, same thing with like marketing. I feel like when we went through JMU, it's still a really great place to learn, but there was a lot of freedom when I went through there. Yep. I don't think, and a lot of listeners might not know you individually, but I think they'd be really familiar with your work. And one of the reasons I was so happy to have you on there is I'm just a huge fan of the work you've done over the years.
Well, cool. Thank you. Very flattering.
Yeah, well, it's pretty amazing work. And I think we all watch each other's work, and some of my favorite stuff some of my favorite copy and favorite ads are stuff you've worked on.
I appreciate that.
Talking to Scott Whithouse, who I know I think he's a fan of the work too. And it was just really fun talking to him about it and then getting in touch with you. So you worked on, for GEICO, a lot of the campaigns that I think are kind of iconic. The Happier Than, the It's What You Do campaigns, and the Made Easy campaigns. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, those have been recognized with so many awards. You've gotten everything from Effies to Webbies to Cannes to everything you can get. And I just wanted to get some of your perspective on that work. So for instance, the Happier Than, that iconic GEICO Hump Day ad, which has always been a personal favorite of mine. And, when that was out, I would hear people around client offices and other offices doing the voice and doing the bit. And that's got to be weird for you if you ever overhear that.
I mean, I think it was the bane of a lot of middle teachers' existence for a while, because a lot of kids were taking over. Honestly, for Hump Day, I would say it was, it's a good example. And I always say, like, the scripts are a starting line, not the finish line. and the end result was much better than it ever was on the script.
Yeah.
And there was sort of an alchemy of the voice talent was really special, the rhythm of his performance, and just the real star for that was actually the editor. Really just found a cadence and a kind of rhythm to the spot, and I want to say the original script that even almost had him say hump day earlier in the script. So, but just that tension of guess what day it is till the very end. And so, I pride myself. I'm like, I know a lot of marketers or advertisers want everything figured out, at the agency level and the script level before I get into production. But, if you find great partners, and we have great editors, a great director, great client partners, creative directors, where you set a stage for people to add things and build onto it and to be collaborative. Like that was an example of it was much the end result was a lot better than where we started on the script. So I pride myself on like deep down not having to figure everything out and getting good funny people and talented people to add their kind of thumbprint to it. And I think the best work I've worked on is I like taking credit for other people, taking other people's stuff. And I'll say
Sure.
some of the best stuff that we've come up with is the stuff that makes it memorable was stuff that people just added in the process, whether on set or in the edit or the director. For example, we did that spot recently, just a different campaign. It was the ant spot for the Amazing. And, the script was fine, but, the director and the talent added a little, and she says expired. Like there was just something you just throw out on set. And, I give GEICO credit, the client credit, where like a lot of clients were like, oh, you have to test this. Every little second of the storyboard has to be planned out and approved. And GEICO's strength is, obviously we capture what is approved, but they let the director and the talent add their own personality, and that's the stuff that's generally pretty memorable and makes it more human and doesn't feel scripted or homogenized. So I give credit to all the partners, and director was great. They're adding a lot, and so yeah.
Yeah, that's really rare in our industry sometimes. I think
Mhm.
too rare, and maybe that's what, there's sort of a secret sauce somewhere in the Geico world of spots and messages that I always admire, and it's that feeling of like almost like creative freedom and fun, where you don't feel like somebody focus group the hell out of the thing.
Right. And I think there's a little bit of trust. I mean, I think Chris and our CEO would say when you have a long, strong, creative relationship with a client, and it's not just project by project or just transactional, where they know you're not trying to pull one over on them. They
Yeah.
know you're not just trying to do it for reward. You really are everyone's best interests are at heart, and you want the work to break through the clutter. And so I think that trust builds up over doing a lot of work, and that's the byproduct of it. You have work that's more spontaneous and more human, and yeah.
Yeah, that ant spot, still this day, there's a ton that I look at, and I've done improv comedy for years and performed, and obviously a theater background as well as marketing, and the comedy writing is really tight. I mean, all of it's really, really good comedy writing. So what's your all's process? Do you set out knowing like, okay, we're coming up with bits, we're trying to come up with different things that'll grab attention and then work around that? How do you guys what's your process to come up with those ideas? Because you guys iterate like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's director based, I would say. Like, I think each director works a little differently. Sometimes directors are much more open to just throwing stuff out. And, usually I have a list of alt lines in my back pocket, and I drive the line producers crazy. I'm like, try this, try this. We got to move on. Try this, try this.
Yeah.
So, I always say great spots are like going grocery shopping. You're not going to find the spot in the grocery store. You're getting the ingredients for the spot. So people always think when you're on set, you're looking at this monitor and you're like, that's the commercial. Like, that's not the commercial. Those are the ingredients for the commercial. And really great work is actually assembled in the edit and knowing dialogue. So for me, it's all about volume. Get this, get this, get this. Like, I don't like belaboring stuff. And because there's sometimes I honestly don't know it's good until you see it. And so I'm always a volume person. I think people work differently, but I'm just like I'm super greedy, and I just want to get as much as we possibly can on set, and trust that we have funny, good people and good editors that can make us look smart.
Yeah. And I think that's great to hear. And I think that's sometimes a lost art. And I think the people who can do it and can riff like that, I think they get a different feel. It has this freshness to it, the spontaneity, like you had said before, that really resonates because it doesn't feel over directed, over produced, over scripted. And, I can think of a lot of, I've always looked at this as an outsider looking at Geico and looking at the work and then seeing you all have a lot of imitators now, or a lot of people who go, oh, that kind of comedy, that brand of using juxtaposition to the message, I want that. So I could name a few brands, I won't, but that kind of try to do the same thing, and it's the sincerest form of flattery. But I still don't see anyone capturing that sort of freshness, that edge that you guys have, and maybe it is the collaboration.
I think it's that. I mean, we're very super grateful and lucky. We work with great directors and partners, and like I said, our clients um, give us that trust that sometimes we'll be doing stuff on set, and you can tell they don't like it, and it's fine, but they give
Right,
us,
they let you.
okay, this is the process, and sometimes it makes a cut, and sometimes it doesn't. But like they don't freak out if we're going in an area where they're not crazy about, as long within reason. So again, I think it's just that having a long-standing relationship gives you that trust that they can let you try dumb stuff, and occasionally it will bear fruit.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's great to hear because I always imagined that was the way it was going, and it's nice to hear that that's actually the reality of it because it has that feeling to it. It has a freshness to it that I don't think you get at other with other brands.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a background in improv, I always look at my job as not really the writer. My job is almost like the showrunner, or like to set up an environment where funny things can happen and then let them happen. Versus like, as a writer with my partner Sean, as an art director, we have to figure out every little thing. We should have some stuff figured out, but generally, the best stuff is letting people funnier than us work. And generally when we cast in LA, and we're casting from people with a lot of improv or groundlings or upright citizens brigade backgrounds. We're like, they're funnier than we are, and like let them be what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think there are a lot of writers that do it that way, and I think there are a lot that don't. And I think when I've seen writers and copywriters approach things like, this is what I wrote, this is what I want said, or even clients approach it that way. And I think the concept of copywriter, showrunner, whether you're producing or whatever your role is, letting everyone add, I think is a real strength because the magic is in there somewhere. Sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes you get something that's just brilliant.
Absolutely. We another spot we did is on my reel. You probably saw, was the spy mom.
Yeah, I love that.
When the woman is talking to calls her son in an inappropriate moment when he's like in the middle of this action movie sequence. And she was great. She was, like, so much funnier than anything we wrote, and, I always say her audition, she sits down in the audition, she completely ignores the script, and she says, she's on the phone with her son, and she's like, "Guess who's not a crossing guard anymore?" I was like, "That's amazing."
That is
Like, it
amazing.
was just like everything she did was funnier than what we had, and then when we had her on set, we have our sheets of dialogue, and she adds, and, she was just great, and that's what you want. You want people that will elevate the material, and you want to let them do what they're supposed to do, and you write some stuff, and then they go off and do their own thing. So yeah, I think that's again, we're super lucky. We have great collaborators or directors, and yeah.
That's really cool. So how do you start your process when you're trying to come up with ideas like that? I mean, obviously, people who do observational comedy, the life is rich with subject matter because I
Mhm.
notice a lot of the observations and a lot of the things that you're playing off of, like moms. The ant spot is a great example of that kind of comedy, where the mom on the phone that you just described, where she's like, the war with the squirrels is now personal, for your dad. That kind of stuff is like, do you pull that from life? Are you looking for it as you're just moving through your day to day? What's your process?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, my aunt, I just saw her this weekend. She was not a fan of that spot. The aunt. But, yes and no. I mean, I think it's more like just sort of like human truths. I think God's best work comes from a space of like humanity. Like, I think and I'm sure you know this, when you do a lot of comedy, where like there's definitely like you get kind of weird and absurd, and sometimes we get in that space, but generally I think the best Gecko work is there's a vein of relatability and humanity, and there is a thread of human truth across our best work. Not always, but a lot of time. And so you always especially, if you like campaigns like it's what you do, like there was a relatability of, your mom calling at inappropriate times. We can all relate with that, or,
Right.
so, yeah, we always try and have that now, try and bring in some thing to get the viewer's head nodding, like, "Oh yeah, that's me," or.
Yeah, I think that that people being able to recognize themselves and recognize themes of absurdity in their own lives in the spots are really what make them so strong. And I think it's some of the work. We won't harp on this for a real long time, but I think it's the work. There's a lot of talk and a lot of efforts with clients that really want to touch pop culture or be part of pop culture or reference it. And I really think what you all have been working together for a really long time, the brand team at Geico and Martin. And obviously you're on the same page because I really feel like some of the things you guys have done have created pop culture moments, not just reference them or, jumped on the bandwagon of others. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, most recently, I wasn't the writer on this. Another writer, Roger and Sean, worked on the tag team for Scoop. There it is, and it's just sometimes it's just lightning in a bottle. Like, those two guys were so just having fun and magnetic and vibrant, and the cast in that was great, and the director, a guy named Dan Ospel from Hungry Man, was just great. It was a little cultural moment in the bottle, and just put it out there, and it's just a little bit like Hump Day, just gets in people's heads, and you see it quoted, and that's sort of what you aim for. That you are trying to amplify our brand's message by breaking through and becoming part of culture. So we try to do that across all our brands.
Yeah. Well, you guys are very successful at that. It's a blast to watch. And I think a lot of other agencies, no matter what the size, we're kind of like a little mini Martin. Like we learn from you guys and we're fans and it's really fun to watch. So your all's work is amazing. One of the things I wanted to ask about that and that relationship is you all. I see a lot of brands when they have a hit. If you had like a Scoop, there it is, or you had one of those, they rest on their laurels and they go, okay, how can I repeat that? How can I
Mhm.
keep going with that? One of the things I've noticed with what you all do is it's almost like you're never satisfied, and there's this iteration and new ideas coming out all the time that I don't see other brands do. There's a lot of new creative and a lot of new campaigns. So that iterative philosophy has got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I can't take credit for this. I know internally, there's this talk on multiple storylines where, because Geico does so much, we can't just be all Gecko or all savings or all, home bundling. That there's different strategic things that you want to take away. Obviously, Geico's lead messaging is about savings, or 15 minutes could save you 15%. But there's other messaging, like they can save you by bundling, or they have a great 24/7 access to licensed agents. There's always other messaging. So instead of giving that its own space to breathe and be its own thing, or 85 years of of service, like the Gecko, like each thing has a more strategic role, so that you're not every campaign. I would say the secret is to be single-minded. Like, a lot of people would be like, oh, we're going to put all these messages into one kind of container. But I
Yeah.
think what Geico does well is each thing has a role, and it's single-minded, and even if it's executionally different, it's because it has a has a different goal and does its own set of heavy lifting, that you don't have to put all the reasons to believe or messaging in one sort of creative execution housing.
From a brand point of view, there's through lines through all of it, and it's very clear. And I think that's really strong. And I think in some ways those campaigns over the years have really changed the rhythm of ads to the better. I think you that work has improved the vocabulary because there's more of a commitment to story, I think, through those than there is to make sure our product gets shown and mentioned 9 times. Were you all really intentional about that? About how often the brand gets mentioned or any of that kind of thing? Or is that just habit by now?
I think it's structural. Like, some of the probably smarter people can explain. I would say, you know, um, I don't think we have a rule of like, oh, you gotta have a brand mention in the beginning. Obviously, they usually do at the end, but usually each campaign has a structure. So There's, for example, believe it. I can't believe it that this happened. The core proposition is usually in the center of the spot. I can't believe how easy it was to say with Geico. That's in the middle. It's what you do was always at the end. Happier than was always at the end. So it's usually like the campaign gives you that structure of where your brand message is. We did a campaign with like with the walrus and goal, with like all that messaging was up front. So it's usually the campaign that dictates when the brand is message, and hopefully there's no rule, and we sort of let the creative execution and campaign dictate where the best place is for the messaging.
Yeah, I think that's something that's like really admirable from the point of view that there's a lot of brands out there still just trying to pack mentions, and you all don't do that at all. You really honor the creative and let the creative speak for itself, and I just think that's something for all of us to learn from.
Well, I read something, and I'm ripping this off from somebody, but and I tell my students this is like, and this is like the simplest thing that most marketers should hear. If I threw 3 or 4 tennis balls at you, you wouldn't catch one. But if I throw one, you're going to catch it. And just being the discipline of being single-minded is the hardest thing. They're like, I'm paying for all 30 seconds. I want as much messaging as I can. You're not going to absorb it. Most people aren't. So that's really hard to get your head around. But I think a lot of great premier clients are the discipline to be single-minded and know that great communication is distillation, and boiling your message, not addition.
I think that's an amazing point. The great communication is distillation, and I think that analogy of how many tennis balls you can catch is really powerful, and it still surprises me to this day how many people don't practice it.
Mhm.
And so there's one other campaign I want to touch on before I jump into some of your work at the Brand Center and then a bunch of other questions. The Sling campaign, the Slingers. I just love that campaign. It's for Sling and Mulvaney. Yeah, Megan Mulvaney and Nick Offerman.
Lolly, yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
yeah.
it's playful. It's really edgy. How did the idea for that come around?
We actually had a campaign preceding it where we met slingers, and they were more ordinary people, and they invited people over to sling. It was one of those ideas, and I'll give our creative director Jerry credit, and the marketing team there were, the Sling did not have the marketing budget of a Hulu or Amazon, so they're like, well, we gotta punch above our weight, we gotta take big swings, and so we need something that is going to be a little more, lack of a better word, edgy, or kind of to cut through. So they were willing to be a little ballsy there with the swinging parallel.
Yeah.
But, the good news is, like, this is a great example of, like, when creatives are showing work, you're like, you can just be edgy for edgy's sake, but there was an undercurrent of strategy there of equating it with freedom, and not having being no commitments, and not being tied down, and having flexibility, like all these things about swinging, we can equate with your TV package.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of like, it really wasn't a parallel to freedom. And so that kind of helped sell it. Where, like, I think if we were just doing the edgy, weird sex jokes, it wouldn't have worked. But the fact there was like a underpinning of messaging, that there was some real value propositions, I think helped it break through. And we did a few rounds of it.
Yeah, I really agree, and I love the single-mindedness of it. I love the portrayal and the tone of like the smarmy characters who just won't let it go.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's
yeah,
this real comedy in the simplicity of repeating the gag over and over again, which is classic comedy. When you repeat it a few times, it gets funnier and funnier. So I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was very well structured and extremely well done. So yeah, good stuff.
And that's a great example of, like, I'm not going to tell Nick Offerman or Megan Mullally, like, how to tell a joke. Like, they would rewrite stuff like in real time, and you're just like, oh, let them go.
Yeah, right. If you're not going to let them go, who are you going to let go?
Exactly.
I think that's something that, like, people who watch this program, you're going to get copywriters and producers and different people at all different stages of their career and early in their career. And I think the perspective that you have of, set people up and let them go is not something that I think everyone thinks about when they think about writing.
No, I love taking credit for other people's jokes. I love it. That makes me happier than someone comes up with a better joke than I would have come up with.
Yeah, it's a shared experience. I mean, to get really good comedy, it has to be shared. So I'm glad to hear that it's kind of like pinging from the writers to the directors to the talent, because that's really how it gets really good. That's the way it works. So You teach at the Brand Center and you teach brand integration. So what's that experience like for you? What is it like to teach the up and coming talent?
It's cool. I mean, it's humbling because, you realize how much I don't know and how much they do know, especially when you're looking at new mediums like TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat or something. I'm like, I realize how much I don't know, but it's great. Only teach writers, so I don't have to stress about you know InDesign or design or stuff like that. I teach first year writers, and I think our class gives them an opportunity to focus on one thing a week. Well, I think at their other classes, they're more focused on a brand. While I'll say, okay, this week we're doing social. This week we're doing outdoor. This week we're doing radio. This week we're doing headlines. Like, so it gives them a chance to, in a way they wouldn't in their other classes, where they're much more turning out brand assignments across a wide range of medium. In our class, we could sort of focus on one medium and like best practices and look at some of the best work within social activations or brand acts or whatever it may be.
Along those lines, like, the some of the things they learn from there, and some of the things I think people that are in this industry at all different parts of their career are always trying to learn, and trying to pick up new information. And, brands are all across the spectrum from very successful with their messaging to not so successful. So what
Mhm.
do you think the biggest mistakes you see in brands making with, story or copy?
Well, what we touched on earlier, just trying to do too much and trying to, not stepping outside of yourself to be like, well, this is really important to us as a brand, but how do you connect that with, okay, how does that help me in my life as an audience member? What's the benefit to me? And sort of like making that jump from, this old fashioned, but attribute to benefit. Okay, this is what we offer, but what is that real world benefit to me? And sometimes most brands or most creatives are so close to, um, we're in love with our own messaging, but we're not making the jump for, okay, how does that make my life better? If I don't understand, how does this solve a problem in my life? That's the biggest problem.
I mean, it's amazing how, I see messaging all the time where I'm like, the people weren't thinking about who the audience is and what they care about, because it's entirely about the audience. Consumers are selfish. It's about what they want and what they care about every single moment of the day. So yeah, if you fall in love with your own proof points.
Yeah, or even for as creatives, your own like cleverness, or own like the difference between execution and something that's insightful and strategic that like again helps solve a problem for the audience. If you don't understand that, it's just then you're just being clever for clever's sake.
Right. Yeah, you just fall in love with your own stuff.
Yeah.
So what's had the most impact on your perspective as a writer or storyteller?
For me, it's I would say it's the 10,000 hour rule, where like for that Malcolm Gladwell thing, where like um, doing something over and over and over and over and over again got me much better, and not understanding that like that, and I tell my students where um, being a creative it's much more of a trade. We're much more like plumbers or roofers that you really have to learn by doing and doing again, and you start making shortcuts and you start making connections. And so, I think there's a lot of things I'm not good at, but the things I'm stronger at is because I've done it, 10,000 hours of it. And that's hard to get your head around. And I always say the worst thing a creative department could be called is a creative department. So it's just this idea like, you're creative or you're not. Or you have to have, if you're innately creative, you can just do this job, or if you're not creative, if you don't belong in this department. Like, I think that's nuts. I think it's much more of a trade, and obviously you have to have some innate ability, but the best people learn by doing over and over again. And when you're starting out, it's not that your ideas are bad or good or you're creative or not. It's just like there's a learning curve, and you'll get better as you go, and trust the process. So that took me a while to learn that. You think, oh, I'm just not creative, or I'm not good at this, but you have to learn that it's going to take some time, and you just get better as you go, and you only learn by doing.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think are some mistakes you made when you were younger in your career?
I think most creatives go into um, you know uh, attaching too much of yourself to your work. Like, oh, they didn't like this campaign, they didn't like this work, they don't like you. Something's wrong with this work, something's wrong with you. Just knowing that to separate your creative self-worth from any given campaign that's on the table at any given time. I think that's the number one thing for creatives. They just get so attached to work that it's really just where you are at that moment in time. And yeah, I talk a lot about that with juniors where like you got to have a hard wall between you and your work. You have to be sort of a cold-hearted mercenary about stuff sometimes because it's going to die and you have to be fine with that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it gets changed for great reasons. Sometimes it gets changed. You don't know why, and you never will. And I think you do have to have a thick skin and be able to just, it's like being a creative or being in a copywriter or a producer in this industry. It's a lot like being a cornerback in the NFL. You're going to have a really short memory.
Yeah, you can't think about that last fumble.
No, you really can't. You just have to keep going. So, you mentioned, we were talking a little while ago, you mentioned, new media, TikTok, all that stuff. And the world of content is changing every single day. So what do you think the future looks like for copy, and what kind of new demands are being put on you right now?
I mean, it's not a secret that, younger people are consuming media differently, and it's much more bite size. It's much more vertical. I'm not an expert. I'll just say that, but like, we're talking a lot about TikTok, and we had a workshop recently, and they were talking about like, don't do ads, do TikTok. So much more be native and contextual where they are, and younger people are much more. They're just more suspicious of overly branded, overly being propositioned, being marketed to. So we have to be smart about that. So we do have to dial up the relatability and the authenticity with that audience. And so I think that's the name of the game of authenticity. It has to come from a grounded, human, relatable place. And if they feel like it's too much marketing speak or you sound like a brochure, I mean, I think young people are super sophisticated when they know they're being marketed to, and they sort of shut down. So that's, it's good, but it's harder.
It is. Yeah. I mean, their BS filters are finely tuned,
Yep.
and they're suspicious of all messaging. So it is harder. And is it harder to write shorter and shorter format?
I think so. I mean, they say like 15s are the new 30s.
Yeah.
Your concept better work in 15. And people are like, what are the sixes? And I'm like, I don't even know. So I will say one thing on that is like, you do have to be a little bit more visual.
Yeah.
People are scrolling.
Right.
A lot of our concepts are becoming more visual. There's just more that'll stop you. Like there's some kind of juxtaposition or something that surprises you visually, not just dialogue or audio wise.
I think that is a big change that the whole industry is going through, where you have to think, what's the visual hook instead of what's the copy hook or the other kind of hook. So how do you work to get the most out of it? So you have an idea and it's going to be used in multiple formats. You're going to have long form, shorter form. What kind of work do you do to get the maximum value out of all those different variations and iterations?
I mean, I'll just say for GEICO, we usually will have a concept, and then it'll be a 30, we'll do a 15, there'll be a vertical, we may do some sixes out of it. There's some stuff we'll use for Instagram, and hopefully there's something in there that's insightful enough that you could do different iterations on, or sort of riff on, that could live in other formats. Again, being visual helps. Like a lot of times because Instagram is such a visual thing, people don't have sound on, so have titles or supers do the heavy lifting. So it's almost like a lot of the best, in my opinion, it's almost like the new outdoor. Like it has to be very engaging. There's motion, obviously, but it has to stop you in the same way a billboard does. Very quick, very visual, not a lot of words. And so hopefully all our concepts have something that we can boil it down to its essence and still work in 6 seconds or 15 seconds, no sound on.
Yeah. And I think that's a format where, going back to what we were talking to a little while ago, like if somebody doesn't realize that you can just throw one tennis ball instead of 3,
yeah,
and they want to pack, benefits or information into these short forms, you end up with just, I don't know, a fruit stand of information, really. It's crazy.
Well, the good news is you can like swipe up for more, or click here, or like whatever. So you have that opt-in, but yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like a really challenging and kind of a fun challenge, though. Do you feel like you've been doing this a while? So I think you've been in the industry like, what, 25 years, something like that, 20 odd?
Yeah. Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you like, a lot of people I've seen in our industry, they burn out because they don't like change.
Hmm.
They just don't let, they get to the point where they're like, man, I was good at 60-second spots and I love them. And I don't like, I don't want to do a 15 now that I'm being asked to. And, all these new formats are frustrating. How do you cope with the constant change? Because some people don't cope well.
I think if you ask people I work with, they say I don't cope well, but no, I'm kidding. Um, I think at the end of the day, it's just about humanity and being relatable and having that truth in there and being fun and surprising. And, hopefully that is a constant, being surprising. But, I think there's definitely some brands I don't think I would thrive on. Maybe stuff if it's skewed a little younger or whatever, I probably would struggle. But I do think for Geico, there is a broader cross section of the country what it appeals to. It's just a little bit, lack of a better word, more mainstream comedy. It's not weird for weird sake. It's not too absurdist. So hopefully there is that relatability and humanity and something that, okay, I can see myself in this, even in this fun, weird, twisted world. There's some truth to it that connects me, and I'm hoping that's age agnostic. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think it is. I mean, I think there's messaging that is definitely like, on this edge that it appeals just to, the TikTok generation, the people that just want that kind of thing. But that's one of the things I love about Geico is I think it really does appeal to a broad range of audiences because the humor is pretty universal. And I think that's one of the strengths of what you guys do is you don't pick things that are so specific that you alienate people. You pick experiences that I think all of us have, parents, those kind of things.
And I will say, and this is kind of like, I would say brands are doing less humor. Like, if you look at classic humor brands like FedEx, this is Sports Center. There's a handful of others I can't think of. Maybe some light beer like Bud Light or class like they come and go with Bud Light in fairness or Miller Light. Like there are less brands doing humor. It's not to say they are. I mean, they're the competition, but Progressive does a good job, and there's a handful of brands that do great job, and we emulate. But short form humor, there's less and less of it. So hopefully, we could still play in that space and stick out.
Yeah, I think so. Why do you think there are less brands doing it?
I don't know. I don't know. I have a diatribe on that. I don't know how true it is, but I think this whole. I'm not slagging on them because I like them, but that like start with why Simon Sinek, the
Yeah,
whole like what's our purpose? What's our
yeah,
like we're very self-important, and sometimes they're just like no, um, we must always operate from a place of the audience doesn't care. The audience does not. You are a nuisance. We forget we're a nuisance. We forget we're a distraction. We forget that people pay to avoid us. So we can't always assume that they're in the mind space that they want to hear how important we are or all these important things we're doing. Sometimes they just want to be entertained. It's like that Howard Gossage thing. It's like people just want to watch things that they like, and sometimes those things are ads. I'm sure I butchered that quote, but
no, no, but I'm glad you brought that up because I love that perspective. I'm going to talk about that some more because I think there's a place, and it's very useful to connect with people's values, but it's also in some ways a trend right now in that everyone isn't walking around thinking about their values 24 hours a day. Everyone isn't motivated. There's a lot of times during the day where I just want to smile, or other people just want to smile and laugh at something. And sometimes entertaining someone is doing them a favor, depending on what's going on in their life. And I think it's become there's a lot of messaging that's so earnest about what we're doing in the world and how we're making a difference and how we care that it's starting to become very homogenous.
yeah. And it's not to say I'm not a fan of some brands doing that really well. Like
Yeah, some people kill it, but
Translation just really did that stuff for you love me not for Beats, and it was just super lovely and great and impactful and insightful, and there's a lot of great work in that space where again like if you can be very surprising and human, there's obviously a place for that stuff to break through and really have impact. But sometimes I think a lot of brands forget that we're a distraction,
yeah.
and not everyone has the mind space that we do as marketers to be like, this is really important. Everyone cares about this. Like, no, they just want to look at Facebook.
Yeah. they're just
They just watch a football game.
yeah, they're just busy and distracted. Yeah, and I think there's some brands that connect to purpose so naturally that they're made for it, if we see it, we're like, yeah, well, yeah, I get it. But that's one of the things with Geico is like, what Geico offers is important and we need it. But I think the brand team and everyone involved is smart enough to know, like, you could be, I've seen other companies in that space tell me how it's going to save me or make my life better, or, do all these things that are more aspirational or more, values based, for however you want to put it. But you all stay committed to this comedy. So every time I think about the brand, I smile. And that's pretty rare. I mean, when you think about it, it's the product is insurance, and you know that's not a smiley product usually. And every time I think about Geico, I'm always grinning because you guys just have entertained me for years and years.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that. Really, that was something that came 20 years ago, of like inside of like everyone else in the category was telling you're in good hands or trust your local agent. And then they just realized actually people don't want to think about getting into an accident. They don't want to think about when something goes wrong. They just the role of insurance in most people's lives is just a bill and they want to keep it low. 90% of the time, 99% of the time. So that was a sort of a big breakthrough. And
It's a really smart insight, but I think the fact that you all have stayed committed to it for so long, I think that's brilliant. I think that's just something to be extremely proud of and admire, because it's so consistent that it's you know someone else could get in charge and think, oh, let's do you're in good hands. But I just don't think that brand is so established as being the brand that lightheartedly reminds us of these things, that I think it's just such a strong position. You guys kind of own it.
yeah, yeah.
Very cool. What do you think for you is the most challenging part of being a copywriter today, in today's world?
This is a credit to our clients. Like you have to have some brave clients. You have to have some clients that are willing to cut through. By definition, you have to have a little bit of an edge. Doesn't mean you have to be super edgy or, you know, throwing F bombs or whatever, but you do have to have brave clients. And it is hard when sorry, my dog is barking.
Oh, no
Uh,
worries.
you have to have clients that are willing to get on board and take risks sometimes, and calculated risks, smart risks. But if you're always playing it safe and playing not to lose, that's a struggle. So I think as creatives, and I do think clients are self-selecting. Like they reach out to the kind of agencies that are doing the kind of work they want. So hopefully,
Yeah.
if they're reaching out to a Wyden, a Droga, Martin, or whoever, right, they are reaching out for the kind of work that they do. And there's advantages to all those agencies, but hopefully, you want clients that share the same appetite for affecting culture and getting work talked about. But by nature, you have to do some things that are outside of the norm to kind of break through the clutter.
I mean, it's really admirable when brands do that and they don't think they want to do it, but they don't really want to do it. I think, the people that self select and the people you all end up working with, you know, um, always are ready to take some risks, and the right kinds of risks. So, what's a piece of advice that you've been given about, this industry or your specialty in it that's really stuck with you?
That's a good one. I don't remember who gave me this, but don't take praise too seriously and don't take rejection or criticism too seriously. So, like, just know that it's fleeting and it's just where you are at that place in time, like I said. So, like, awards or praise, like, cool, cool. This sucks. It's,
Yeah.
I hate this ad. Cool, cool.
Cool.
You start to see the long arc, and you see sometimes how arbitrary someone's reactions can be, and sometimes it's where you are in that moment of that piece of business and culture or what that person's feeling in the moment. And again, like I said earlier, don't take things personally. And when you're doing creative, you really do have to have some distance between your work and yourself and your own sort of self-esteem. And so that's the thing I think is like, it's cool to get praise, but it's also
Yeah.
it's fine. It's cool.
Yeah. That's a really healthy way to look at it.
I know I sound super healthy and well-adjusted. I'm not at all.
Right.
Sometimes I'll get out the phone. I was like, I'll be all upset if
Yeah.
something didn't happen. I didn't win awards or something didn't buy something I loved. So,
Yeah.
But I have to go back to that where like this is temporary, it's fleeting.
Yeah, at least you're aspiring to it.
And also like our job is, I'm sure in your end's the same, where like by nature when things are subjective, it's just a dysfunctional process.
Yeah.
It's arbitrary and the target's moving and the goalposts are changing and all that stuff. And just to always step back and be like, we're super lucky to do what we do. And being grateful, like someone pays us to come up with ideas and make them and put them out in the world. And just even when things are frustrating, I try to remember like we're super lucky to do what we do.
Yeah. We could, the people in our industry don't have, jobs in public transportation, for instance, or
Right.
sanitation, or there's a lot of stuff we're not doing that I think that helps me too, because, you're right. It's really subjective. Sometimes you'll have worked on something and someone comes in and goes, nope, don't like it. And they can't explain it, but that's the way it's going to be. And you just have to be able to have a healthy attitude towards it. Or you just burn out.
1,000%. Yeah. Well,
What do you think? I only have a couple more questions and I'll get you out of here, but what do you think makes you feel most inspired at work?
when I see other people doing stuff within the agency that I know I couldn't have done, and we've done some really lovely work for DoorDash recently. They have a new documentary they just launched at Tribeca this week called "The Soul of the City." It's all about about the role of owners of restaurants, especially like immigrants and first generation immigrants and people of color. Just like it's really inspiring about really like the heart of the restaurant business in New York. And when I see stuff I know I couldn't have done, and it's not my sweet spot or whatever, and I'm always inspired by different facets of work and tone and especially seeing younger people come up and deliver, and it's cool. It's fun to see young people do cool stuff that you could not have done, and they're bringing their voice and their experiences and their authenticity to projects, and that stuff gets me fired up.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's one of the reasons, like, trying not to be too much of a fanboy talking to you today, but like your all's work inspires me. I love our work, but our work's really different. We have different kinds of clients, but I watch you guys, and I'm always celebrating your successes along with you because I just love it, and it makes me feel fired up. So this past year, my last two questions. This past year, you're working from home right now. It has been really challenging. But what's the most positive thing you took away from it?
Um, I feel like I manage my day better. Like I'm less. I mean, I realize how much time I waste in the office just like dicking around, talking to people, and like, hey, what's going on? I'm much more efficient. I feel like get to see my kids more and my wife more, and I think everyone's kind of playing that back. You just get more family time. I just feel like I'm a lot more efficient. And that's what I've taken from this. When I'm not, uh, I don't know, there's a lot of distractions in the office. I feel like at home I'm just a little bit more focused.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope you get to continue to keep that because there's been some real things that I think we've gained throughout
Oh,
this.
don't get me wrong. My wife wants me out of the house. She's not as pleased with me being around as I am. She's ready for me to go back.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that can happen. So last question. So what advice would you give your younger self from today?
It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and I I know, scratch that. That's a good one. It's not a sprint. Don't burn yourself out too soon. Don't be sprinting at mile 2 or 3. It is a marathon, and take care of yourself. But I think the big thing, and this is a good lesson for all creatives, is, and I'm not great at this, but sort of like what's that saying? Like comparison is the thief of joy. Like if you're always, it's creative people, advertising people are naturally very competitive. We're always like comparing ourselves. Oh, that person got this Super Bowl spot. That person's at this agency. That person got this award. That person got this on this assignment. And you're always going to play that game. That person's won this pitch. They're at that agency. And I feel like that. I did a lot of that early on, and it's just not healthy. You just have to sort of compare yourself to yourself and your own growth. And going back to the marathon, like don't compare where you are at mile 2 when someone else is at mile 17. Like you're in different parts of your journey, and just kind of focus on yourself. Again, I sound very well adjusted. I'm not at all. I'm always on LinkedIn being like, those a-holes.
Can't believe he got that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I sound really enlightened, but I'm not.
Well, it's good to at least present to the world that you're enlightened, and then,
Yeah.
on the side, be dysfunctional. That's really the best
Yeah.
way to be.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks a lot for doing this today, man. This was a pleasure.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate all the kind words. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk to JMU alum and stuff. I talked to JMU once. They had me like some ad club function
Yeah.
like 5 years ago. I think I dropped too many F-bombs. They never called me back. But I still am proud of going
Yeah.
there.
I thought, that's one of the reasons we started this podcast was, my interest in talking with, I spend a lot of time with, other executives and CMOs and stuff like that. But, I'm just really passionate about the people that do the work, and I've done, I was talking to Scott when I was first starting my career, I edited video. I did a
Oh,
ton of
fun.
editing. I've directed,
Cool.
productions and plays. So it's the people who make the stuff that I just want to talk to,
Yeah, yeah,
And so I just
yeah.
think this is a blast. And we're kind of trying to connect the dots with that, with the people who actually run companies and are in
Hmm.
leadership because, it's all storytelling. We're all just trying to
Hmm.
tell a story and we're all sort of
Yeah,
in the same boat here. So it's kind
yeah.
of a cool thing to try to pull together.
I mean, what's kind of neat is what's happening now, and we see it as like the barriers for production and video and having good production values are so much lower than they used to be. Like you with the editing and the shooting, if you're smart, especially at the conceptual level, you can do something on a national, international level, even though for a fraction of the budget.
Yeah.
So I think the game has really changed for people that are smart about embracing simplicity, conceptually could do very, work that competes with anything.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
it's super cool.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me, and it's super flattering to be asked. And people ask me questions about what I think. No one cares what I think. It's nice to be. It's nice to be. No one in my house cares what I think. My kids don't care, so it's nice to be
Yeah.
asked.
It's good to have a minute where somebody really is into
Yeah,
what you think.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. Cool. Well, I appreciate you having me. It was lovely meeting you.